Hidden
Not
bus.
not with people interfering with you. No.
No. I
I
suppose
I
I've never
think
played bus, but had you played it before, Trent?
15 years ago.
Okay. Like every game.
Yeah.
Hmm. But I guess that'll be on another episode sometime.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk about it today. I think that'd be a poor choice.
No, no, you're talking about Great Zimbabwe, which I think you've mentioned. I think you hyped it before when the reprint was going to come. But yeah, I'm excited to be able to share in your enthusiasm a little bit. 18 Ireland from Andy. I'll do some Watson and Holmes. So Trent, I was telling Andy. By the way, we are live now. In case
I know.
Andy gets fresh with any of his practice, his vocabulary here for his rap battles later on. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do styles where they take C's off the front of words to get the name.
Okay. I'm gonna have to think about that for longer than I need to, Andy, to get it.
That's most of my jokes.
No, no. Usually your jokes are ones where I know the punchline because I've already heard it, like, but I just don't remember it exactly. So usually, but I'm gonna be reviewing Watson and Holmes, and like I said to Andy, I just posted or I just had a live recording of the sound coefficient of it, and one of the reasons I wanted to do that is just so that I could maybe refer to it and say like, hey, if you want to hear more about it, you can go check out my review of Watson and Holmes, the sound coefficient, and I'll just give you like kind of a shorter version now. And I don't know how that's going to work, but I'm trying it out here. But I think at the very least, what it should do is make it so that I'm not like speaking more than I should.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I hope you had a good birthday, Trent. This is day
It-
number
it-
one of what are you now? Like you're
39.
Methuselah's age, aren't you?
I'm 39.
39. Basically the gaming Methuselah.
Pretty much. Now, you need to see the Graybeard room at Gen Con.
Oh,
Oh,
dude.
God.
Where would you say is the
Everybody
most
knows
graybeard?
70s.
The Wargamer room or the Puffing Billy room?
The Wargamer room.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Hands down.
The Grognard room?
At the old timey, they probably fought in World War II room.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. All I'm gonna do right now is click on
Joe,
our.
we're just like cost us all our war game listeners.
Oh no, nothing wrong with. Yeah, that's. You guys said it. 'Twas not me. 'Twas not. All right. I'm just doing this pop-out chat so that we can see if anybody's joining us right now. I will share the pop-out chat link with you guys. We're still in sort of our cleaning here. Looks like we got a viewer. And I'm not sure if that might just be. No, I think there's more than just me. Maybe it's one of you guys here. Let me. Yeah, we haven't started recording yet. Didn't really remind everybody, but I'm sure that like we're still keeping our schedule. So hopefully we got like maybe we'll get Adam or Murr or somebody.
Oh, it's Kyle.
Yo, Kyle, how's it going? Kyle, I've been thinking more and more about like just what you had said at one point about like 1830 and 1889 just being like this ride where you're trying not to like fall off essentially because they usually for you guys end in bankruptcy. And to me that was just like such a really cool way to capitulate those games of like being kind of like almost like a Jethro Tull like through the shuffling madness. Oh man, this is the time of the year to get sick. You're supposed to get sick in like flu season and stuff and then pass it on to everybody else. Or you can be like Andy and be sick all the time.
Yeah, pretty much.
He's this winter season's Typhoid Kyle.
Typhoid Kyle, Typhoid Mary. Nice. I posted the pop-out chat if you guys, but we're both already there. Yeah, we're good. Hey, then there's TC. TC's here. Hey TC. I just mowed my grass. By the way, full disclosure, got stung by a bee, said a bunch of bad words. I'm not going to repeat them here because I'm not Andy. But I got stung by a bee and it hurt so bad But as I was cutting the grass, I was listening to the new stuff from the What Did You Play podcast, and they had that thing about Deus, which I listened to, and I totally had forgotten that you'd even when you like said like, "Hey, dude, you want to join me for this?" And I was like, I don't have enough experience with the game to talk about it, man. Sorry. But like, I loved your segment. Definitely my favorite part. Like, the most entertaining part of that entire thing was your segment, TC. And also, then I listened to like Paul Grogan, because me and TC are going to be recording with Paul Grogan tomorrow morning about Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And I don't know if this is just something I do, but like when I was cutting the grass, I was coming up with what's probably like the worst jokes of all time to maybe start with. I don't know. This sounds like something Andy does, maybe.
I once on a family car trip tried to see if I could come up with a joke for every symbol on the periodic table.
Oh no, man!
And proceeded to torture my family for the whole trip.
Yeah, Andy. Yeah, and this is what we get to game with, everybody who's jealous. Oh boy, so I think, guys, we got everything here pretty much ready to set up and ready to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and click record, because why not? Or not click record. I'm just gonna do a countdown here, unless anybody stops me. Somebody stop me. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm your host, Joe Sallin. Tonight, I'm joined by
Andrew Dennison,
Trent Ham.
And it's great to be back in Iowa. I know it feels weird saying that, and I'm saying that because it's like summer, and I just spent a lot of time down in a place where it was really, really hot on the coast of on the Gulf Coast of Florida. But it was nice. I mean, we ended up getting hit by Tropical Storm Emily. Whew. So that, and then I got greeted by a bee sting when I mowed my grass just a few hours ago. So that was pretty nice. Iowa loves me. Anyway, I'm just happy to be back here because it means I'll get some more time like playing a few more like gamer type games. Though I did get a chance to play a few kind of lighter games and even recorded once from Florida. Our last episode, I was actually down there. So anyway, I wanted to take a quick second to thank our sponsor, Games Surplus. And you can find them at gamesurplus.com. They are just now excited to announce, well, I'm not announcing, it's already been announced, but they now are actually covering Asmodee products. So they kind of got skunked out on that for a little while because Asmodee had these really bad rules where they wouldn't allow anybody to sell their games unless they had a brick and mortar store. Now, fortunately, it's gotten to where Game Surplus is able to carry their products again. So go check out specifically the game I'm going to be reviewing. If it sounds interesting to you, Watson Holmes is carried by Asmodee. Send Carmen, Games at Game Surplus, an email if you're interested, and he'll be able to track copy of that down for you. So check him out, gamesurplus.com. Another thing, and I'm very pleased to make this announcement, over the last few weeks, and together with the help of my co-host from the Longview podcast, TC, Tattered Board, who's joining us here in the comments, in our chat, we've been working on getting to be a member of a podcast and board game media. I don't want to say conglomerate, but just kind of like a group. And essentially, I'm making the announcement right now that this podcast, which is up until now been solo mode only, has now gone full co-op by joining Punchboard Media. So they've got some really cool stuff. Paul Grogan of Gaming Rules, his podcast, all the stuff he posts is part of Punchboard Media. He's got some really interesting, good stuff to check out. What Did You Play podcast has some cool stuff. That's just a couple of things that I had a chance to listen to in like the day or two that I've had since joining the network and checking out what they got. So very, very cool stuff. Very happy to be a part of podcasters and just people passionate about gaming, helping other people that are just as passionate about gaming. So really cool stuff. And big thanks to Punchboard Media for opening their doors and welcoming us in. And go check all of their stuff out, punchboardmedia.com. So, the good, the bored, and the ugly. What we do after we get done with all kinds of announcements is review games. We'll then tackle a topic in the hobby, which is going to make Andrew Dennison spontaneously combust in front of everybody's eyes. And our topic tonight, Andy, is...
Andy's asleep.
I know he's looking at us right now. He's not saying anything. Andy?
Oh, games that aren't Dominion.
Wow. Wow. Thanks, Andy.
No, like games that heavy gamers might still play.
Wow. Even just listening to the way he phrased that. It was like...
Given what I witnessed from Andy a couple months ago, that list would include Tiny Epic Western.
That was under duress, and that was your fault, Trent.
I do remember looking across the room and thinking, what? Andy?
It was me, Andy, and another guy in our group playing Tiny Epic Western. It was pretty something.
Yeah, because Trent, I love Trent. Trent proposed this topic, and I think that Trent thought that it would not only be a good thing to talk about, but that watching Andy squirm is something we might not have seen enough in the recent past. So I love how you phrase that, though. This is light games, like recommended for heavy gamers, or just straight up light games for heavy gamers. What does Andy say? Light games that heavy gamers might play if they have to.
I got
they guess. Yeah, Andy, you need like a Possum Lodge pledge to give to, like heavy gamers at the end of every episode of The One the Ugly.
I'm a heavy gamer, but I can change if I have to, I guess.
So, in a nutshell. So I'm excited to hear what we have to do, what we're going to get to about that. Before we get there, though, first of all, big happy birthday coming from me. And I just wanted to let all you guys know that just last night, Trent celebrated his birthday. And he celebrated his birthday, I would almost call it Andy style. Trent, why don't you tell him what you did?
I played 2 Splatter games. That seems like a good birthday to me. I went to game night, played a whole bunch of games, including 2 Splatters. It was a good night.
Oh, yeah. You add 2 Splatters to a game night. Chances are it's good game night.
Yep. I had
so. Yep. All right. Well, happy birthday, Trent. And I'm really, really sad that I missed it. I mean, I ended up even getting punished by this bee sting that's making it difficult for me to walk around. But anyway, yeah. So that the gods have already sought their retribution at Trent. You don't need to hurt it anymore. I suppose if you wanted to, though, you could just, bring like an EpiPen and jam that into my leg and be like, "Here's for your bee sting."
Okay, I think I'll pass.
since I've now mentioned like 5 times. Oh goodness. So anyway, guys, we're going to start here by reviewing some games. We'll then talk about our topic. We'll, on our way out the door, hype some games. And wanted to invite everybody. We do record these podcasts live. So to those of you that are listening to us on our amazingly produced iTunes version that's done by our lovely editor, Josh, you can find us as we record these live, which is done at about 8:45, 9 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. So come check us out, and we already got an active chat going on right now with a bunch of friends, and it's great to hear from people, other podcasters, other folks. I mean, it's just awesome. So come join us when we record, and I will read your comments, and a lot of those get mentioned as well in the podcast. So let's go ahead and let's kick it off with our great segue that I'd already done here, and let's bring it back, Trent, to tell us about one of those splatters that you played last night.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a good way to put this. I'm trying to decide before the podcast which one to review, and I decided to go with the Great Zimbabwe. The other option was Bus, mostly because I think I need to play Bus a couple more times before I get into discussing that one. But I have played Great Zimbabwe several times, so I decided to talk about that. The Great Zimbabwe is a splatter game. Splatter is for those unfamiliar, is a small boutique European publisher that tends to publish pretty heavy Euro-style games. They really like to publish games that are in the style of you really got to study the board, and you've got to really think about how other players are going to interfere with you. They're very tactical, very player interaction heavy style Euro games. And Great Zimbabwe is one of them. It's considered one of their, I guess, more well-known titles. Recently had a reprint. I think the reprint is still fairly widely available.
Yeah, Joe Wiggins called them the Big Five when we recorded about Indonesia, but this is one of those Big Five, like you mentioned.
Yep, it's considered one of their major titles, whereas Bus is probably in the second tier, the other one I was going to review. Anyway, so Great Zimbabwe is basically it's a map made out of squares, and each player represents a tribe that's trying to maximize their influence and grow their culture overall in this area. And the way they do this generally, the way they score points, is by erecting monuments. But to erect these monuments and make them get bigger and bigger, and the big monuments is how you score most of your points, is by in order to build them up, you got to use resources that are available around you. There are 4 different kinds of resources available, and to grow, so you have a monument there. A monument is basically just a stack of discs that's on one of the squares on the board. And to grow your monument up, if you go from level 1 to level 2, you got to have one type of resource. To go to 2 to 3, you have to have 2 different. 3 to 4, 3 different. Level 4 to level 5, which is where you get a ton of points. You got to have all 4 different types of resources. The problem is that different players control those resources, and this is all on the board. The resources are controlled by various players, marked as ownership by them, and you effectively have to pay them for the resources. All of this is on a grid board, so there's a lot of spatial reasoning in this game, quite a lot of it. You have to think in terms of networks, very, very, very much think in terms of networks. It's one of those games where spatial reasoning is pretty much a requirement to play this well.
Oh yeah.
Once you have that down, it becomes a very, very, very mean tactical game, because you can sweep resources out from underneath the legs of other players, because the resources go through an upgrade sequence. And once a resource type is upgraded, a different player can completely take control of it and kind of cut you out in a way, or make it so that your monuments can't be upgraded. So like the board comes with several different kinds of resources by default, but once one of those types is upgraded, you can only go to the upgraded spot to get your resource. But when you go to the upgraded spot, that spot has to have a connection to the basic resource. Then there's another level beyond that where you have a third level resource that has to have access to the first level and the second level. And the second level has to have a connection to the first level. And so once a resource type is used up, you mark it, the first levels are used up, you mark them with a marker. So turn order becomes very important, because as all the resources are used up and around, they're not available anymore. So you might, if you go last, you're probably not upgrading your monuments that round.
Not many of them.
Happening. Yeah. It's just not happening because there aren't enough resources on the board. So the turn order is resolved by an auction with the money. The use of different kinds of resources, you have to pay other players if they control them. The resources have to be within a certain radius of each other, 3 squares, or else you can't use them. And on top of that, there are variable player powers all over the place that you can basically claim each round. But when you claim a variable player power, it makes the number of victory points you have to get to win go up. Generally, there's one of them actually lets it go down, but it doesn't do anything. So you want to get these special powers to make your network better. Then in order to do that, you have to accept that instead of going to 20 victory points, you're not going to 26 or whatever. So there's a lot going on in this game. But what it really boils down to is spatial reasoning, really studying the board and putting together the networks in your head, and clever use of the variable player powers, and a lot of sticking a knife in other players is what it feels like it comes down to me. If that sounds like a mix you'd enjoy, and this game plays in about an hour to an hour and a half, if that sounds like a mix you'd enjoy, I think this would be one you'd very, very much enjoy. It took me probably 3 plays of it for my brain to really wrap around how the game works, because it's not maybe the most intuitive of games, but once it clicks and it makes sense. And it really had clicked last night when I played it. It made sense to me. Unfortunately, one of the other players played a very, very fast strategy and won way quicker than anyone else anticipated. He was very stealthy about what he did. He did not claim a god until late, and he claimed the VR-2 god, and no one accounted for that.
I've seen that happen in the games I've played. I've seen that victory 2 out of like 4 or 5 times.
Yep.
Like where the god that gives you no special ability, but just makes it just a bit easier to win.
Yep. That's what happened. That one got claimed on the last turn. And there you go. Anyway, it's got a lot of interactive moving pieces, but none of the pieces individually are that hard to understand, other than perhaps the resource arrangements on the board. That takes a little bit of, you kind of got to see how it works, but it's not a very complicated game in the end. It just has a lot of spatial reasoning and a lot of player interaction. If that sounds interesting to you, you're going to like this game. That's The Great Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andy.
I would just say the other thing is turn order becomes super important later on in auctioning. You auction for turn order, and I would say that if you're going last in what is probably likely to be the last round or two, you are not winning that game.
Yep. I'd agree.
The best thing about the game must be that the currency is cows. Thanks to TC for reminding us of that. And the thing here, though, is not just, in my opinion, the currency being cows isn't so much the important thing, but I really love that they are cows because it's such a tight economy. Like, you never have more than, what do you start the game with, 3? 3. You start the game with 3, and you will, like, almost never have more than 10 at any time in the game. Like, you might, but not for long. You spend money, and you don't have that much money, but there's aspects of engine building that you can get going depending on what gods you choose. There's certain gods that are only, like, there's only 2/3 of the gods are available in every game. 4 of those gods are not going to be there. And you only will choose one. So, I mean, like, once you've chosen that one, your strategy is, like, man, you are kind of, like, stuck in. It's one of those where, like, your early decisions can be hugely important. But like Trent said,
it's worth noting that some of those sets of gods change out a little bit. Some of them cause, like, a hyperinflation effect in the game where everybody's just got so much money it's stupid. And, like, first turn order auctions, like, people are bidding 11 or 12 cows for first turn. First player and stuff. That will happen. So,
well, the way that you bid, like, even the auction, like, every phase in this game, Trent, as you went through it, it's just like, yeah, I love how they did that. The auction in this game, you're actually redistributing the wealth among all players, including yourself. So, very cool thing there, almost like a little kickback to Reiner Knizia's Dream Factory. And then after you get done with that, your turn order being so important, you have to then make your action. You only get to choose one action each turn, and I think it's just so clutch that, like, you have to choose one out of, like, 4 or 5 different options, right? There's like several different options. You can either build a new monument or you can upgrade monuments, and there's 1 or 2 other things you can do. And there you can actually build, like, all of the maker, like, the things that produce resources in this game are going to be built by players. So, I mean, everything is so tight. Everything is so tough choices, but it is so compact. Like, Trent, how long did your game of this take?
About a little over an hour.
Exactly.
70 minutes.
Yeah, crazy how fast this goes. It is absolutely crazy, and I love it for that. It is, every little step of this game, to me, just keeps me wanting more. And I would say this is the game. This is the Splatter game that I think just it does not need. If they said we were coming out with an expansion for Great Zimbabwe, even if they said, like, they were just like, we're coming out with 8 new God cards in a little pack, which, it being Splatter, you know, for 8 God cards, Andy, what do you think they charge for that?
$30.
Right?
$30, and they would be twice as big as they're supposed to be.
And they wouldn't fit with the old ones. You wouldn't be able to shuffle up. Love it. All right. But that would be so huge, man. If they had 20 and you were selecting 8 of those, like, oh, just the way that the different gods that are available affect what choices, what possibilities you have. And then on top of that, you've got certain things that, like, there's a lot of constants in the game. And I love the way that the map feels different because of the way you can, like, ship around the water. Like, to me, it's just, yeah, it's a total home run. It has spatial aspects, but the players affect those spatial aspects an awful lot. But it's never done. I would say the board is never something where you can just, like, totally shut someone out of something that easy. And I feel like that happens a lot in, like, Food Chain Magnet. So I like the interaction here. To me, it is, like you said, Trent, very interactive, especially when you buy, like, one of those guys that makes an upgraded resource and just pretty much makes all those earlier resources obsolete unless you can get access to the new upgraded one, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, and they really have fleshed out the system well, but I would love to see even more. This is probably my favorite Splotter game, one of my favorite games. So that was The Great Zimbabwe by Splotter.
And I want to point out real quick, I played a lot of Splotter games. I will say to me, and this might seem strange to a couple people, is the other game I mentioned, Bus. Of all the other Splotter games, it feels the most like Zimbabwe to me.
That's really interesting. I feel like Bus is that one Splotter game that almost makes people reconsider whether or not there should be a big 5. I feel like it's the one that's kind of like Splotter makes some games, in the words of Joe Wiggins, that are kind of just like almost just to have said that they made that game. Like the 18UR, the one that's like set back in, apparently there's like some sorts of commentary in there, and that's basically what the game is about, because the game does not play, like it's not one that you go back and play. Like from what I understand, Bus, Trent, I'm really looking forward to your review of Bus, because
I will say this much. I think if there's a big 6, the 6th is Bus.
Okay.
That's just my take on it, and yeah, we'll go from there in the future. But I will review it when I get some more plays of it.
Absolutely, and I'd love to play it too, so I could actually share a little bit of input. But the fact that you compared it to Zimbabwe, I'm very excited, and yeah, I wonder how much they would charge for a reprint for like if they made a deluxe edition, you know, of The Great Zimbabwe, which by the way comes in a normal size box, it probably would have a pretty hefty cost as well, you know, because they had to stuff all 8 of those extra cards in it. All right, that is The Great Zimbabwe, and let's go ahead now and move right along to let's keep in our heavy sphere here. Let's keep up in that spot, because yeah, we'll ride this high with Andy's review of an 18xx game for all you that love 18xx games.
Yep. So I'm going to kind of talk about 18 Ireland, which is a fairly new one. It was just released, I think it was in 2016? 16 or 17. You can get it at All Aboard Games. This one is got some interesting sort of differences. So I'm not going to go over the basic things that all 18xx's do again. You can look that up on your own or listen to earlier ones where I've talked about them. What makes 18 Ireland unique is it's got this really interesting sort of merger mechanic going on. So you do things like, you know, they got a waterfall auction to get some privates, which is kind of interesting in there too, because if you go around and everybody passes on a certain private, they're out of the game. They don't get sold. So that immediately sets that this is going to be a little bit of a nastier one, a little bit tougher. It's also really austere in terms of money. The bank for this is 4,000, which is like the smallest bank I've ever seen in an 18xx game.
So is the money just smaller, or does it just like run out real fast?
Yeah, Ireland is poor. You don't make a lot of money on the runs.
What do you not actually add zeros behind everything in this game? Is it just like you literally get $1 for going to that city?
No, not quite that bad, but it doesn't pay out a whole lot. It takes a while to get there, but it is a pretty quick one. Our learning game of it was about, I want to think 5.5 hours. I hear it somewhere, once you know what you're doing with this, you can play it in 4 to 5 typically. So it's not a terribly long one, but it is a really, really vicious one. Because one of the main things that makes this game different is the merger mechanics. Now, there are other merger mechanics, 18xx, that are normally friendly. Like, I'm going to merge my thing with another one and, you know, just merge my 2 little companies and make a big company. And, you know, usually you could merge with somebody else's miners, but if they refuse, then, well, you can't do that. Well, that's not how 18 Ireland works. 18 Ireland, it comes down to a vote. So you can vote based on the number of shares you have. So let's say if I had a company and I owned 5 shares of it, and Trent owned a company and had 3 shares of it, I can link them together, and maybe Trent doesn't want to lose his company, but I'm like, you know what? The vote's 5-3. You lost your company. Now, where this also gets nastier in a lot of 18xx games, they kind of do something like the value of your two miners will add together to make a more profitable company. In 18 Ireland, that's not how this works. So in 18 Ireland, what they do is you look for where the meeting point between the two stock markers would be. So it's kind of hard to describe this audio-wise, but basically what can happen is this situation that happened in our game. So we had a very low-value company. Trent had a very high-value company. Somebody brought in, merged with Trent's company, and pulled the value of his company way down. Basically, he lost money on his company because somebody else could cause the merger, and there was no way for him to stop it. So the mergers, the mergers in this game are not necessarily tools; they are weapons. So you can cause mergers to cause somebody to lose lots of money. Because this would potentially be a possibility, Joe. Let's say you had a really good company, and I'm like, you know what? If I don't do something about this, Joe's winning the game. I need to rip him down. Oh, look, I start with priority dealer in the share round. All right, so I have more shares of my crappy little company than he does of his good company. I link it up. I merge them, pull your company down closer to my value, causing you to lose money. Then I hit the share round and I sell off all the stocks I had in that new major, causing your value to drop even more. So it's vicious.
No, that's not even as vicious as you can get. What you do if you're really being vicious is, during the operating rounds, how about that company give all of its money from its treasury to your better company in exchange for its crappiest train?
Yep. And you can do things like that too. Yeah, basically, if you've seen some of our 18xx games, Joe, usually a few of the companies are kind of getting nicely to the end of that stock market, right? When we ended this game, when we played it, almost all of the companies were slightly scattered around the starting stock values.
I just can't even imagine that.
That's how bad we were shanking each other constantly.
Yeah. There was one company that was kind of out in front, and that was mine, luckily. But the rest of them were all around starting stock value.
It was nasty. And the track is just convoluted craziness too.
Is it like a tight map though? Isn't this is a shorter game, or is it, how long did it take you guys?
About, like I said, I think we clocked in about 5.5 for a learning game.
So it's still pretty standard.
Right. But the track is very convoluted. They got some narrow gauge and standard gauge track. But there's a lot of singletons or maybe two of each, so it can get really nasty in how these link up and what they do. I do like what they do with narrow gauge track in this one. If you remember 1849, we played a couple times, Joe, when they had the narrow gauge track that it would just cost you more or less to go up, down that route.
Yeah, I remember that in 1849. It wasn't like a huge part, but wasn't there some times when you kind of needed specific track in certain areas? And
right. Well, and what this one does that's kind of nice is the narrow gauge just adds value to whatever broad gauge it's connected to. So if I have a city that's worth $20 and I connect a narrow gauge station to it, it just adds $10 to the city and that's it. So it's all abstracted out and you don't need to deal with it, but it does lead to these crazy convoluted messes of track that can be really restrictive, even to the point you have a situation where you really desperately need a certain upgrade so you don't have to run your company between two stations for several operating rounds, but somebody keeps taking those track choices away from you, like what happened to Trent.
Well, here's the funny part. Andy keeps saying all this bad stuff happened to me, but
he still won.
I won.
Well, it sounds like they were doing bad things to you because they needed to.
Yeah, the guy who did the meanest stuff to me, I bankrupted him.
Yeah.
Is that how your game ended?
No, this game doesn't end with bankruptcy. You just go get to watch TV while everybody else finishes.
Wow. Who was this? Who all played?
It was me, Trent, the elusive Nate, and Garth. Garth was the one who went bankrupt.
At what hour point?
It was pretty close to the end when he finally went that way.
Yeah, there's about two more operating rounds left. when I
So he
bankrupted him.
started circling the bowl a little bit.
Yeah.
No, Trent found a way to cause him to emergency buy a bunch of trains.
A bunch?
It wasn't a circle. It was like going off the edge of a waterfall is what happened.
Yeah, I caused him. He had 2 companies, and both of them were trainless when I was done with my maneuver, and he did not have enough. He was done. It was over.
Yeah. So, yeah, 18 Ireland, if you like really brutal 18xx's, this is a really good one for that. If you like more nice, gentle, I can have a plan and not have someone like put a dagger in my midsection. This is not one you want to play.
It sounds like it just takes what you already kind of do when you buy stock and then sell stock to lower value, and it adds another level of mean to that, because you can actually like force someone into your company, even though you didn't buy any of the stock in their company. You can still force your companies to merge, and then you can like tank their stock. And it sounds like, from what Kyle said, that you don't want to be president of those companies a lot of times right after they've merged.
No, you don't. I got to dump one of those merged companies that was utter garbage. I got to dump it on Nate.
Oh, that's right.
And that company was garbage. The thing was that the two miners that it combined weren't that bad, but the company that they combined into was trash. That's just how it ended up being. Yeah.
Yeah. The first game of this, I somehow won at HeavyCon, and I remember like, what was it? I think losing, and gaining again the same company throughout the game, as people just kept pillaging it and dumping it on other people.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. My joke was, and I haven't played enough 1830 yet to say this for sure, but my joke is, what does it take to make 1830 look nice? The answer is 18 Ireland. So anyway, this one got a lot of love at HeavyCon. I've been seeing it around a lot, and it's a really good game. This one is interesting and worth having around if you like that more vicious style 18xx. If you like to have a plan and execute it without too much in your face, then you probably want to stay clear of this one.
Yeah, should I what should I probably play first, Andy?
I don't know if you would like this one.
This period, it just kind of gets like really in your face.
I think you would rage at the merger rounds.
Yeah.
I don't think you would like that very well. I want to play it with our friend Jake, who doesn't like player interaction.
No, and he's never even played any 18xx games, so what a great way to introduce him to 18xx games.
Yes.
Well, he did like the Great Zimbabwe, so he's at least got that much towards becoming one of us. And I don't even know if I can actually say one of us. Do you have anything else to share, Andy, about 18 Ireland?
That's pretty it. That was kind of the major funkiness of it and what it did. I just thought it was a really good one and really interesting. And definitely, I think it's probably a better game at higher player counts from what I've heard. I've heard it's not very interesting below 4, and some people say 5 or 6, because otherwise it's a little bit too nice. So if you get to 5 or 6, it's kind of like 1830 in the sense that somebody's probably walking away from the table bankrupt.
You make that sound like it's a bad thing.
No, I don't. I like it, but yeah. No, I would say a lot of people are saying it's a lot better it's a lot better of a game when you get closer to 5, 6.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, it sounds like an interesting one, and it sounds like you guys had a load of fun with it. And Garth probably had a load of fun catching whatever was on TV there towards the end of your game.
And he had fun going home to watch Game of Thrones.
Oh, well, yeah. It was a pretty good episode this week, so he was at least rewarded that way.
I guess, yeah.
All right. Well, the reason I was saying earlier that I'm not really sure if I can say one of us is because here we've got Splotter, we've got 18xx, and I'm about to review a game that is actually almost feels, in my opinion, the thematic game of this. So maybe I'm being kind of more like the Jonathan Pierce of our podcast here. I'm going to be talking about this game right here. If you can see, if you're watching our live feed, Watson and Holmes. I've got the old beautiful version from Ludonova. And Asmodee did something that I've seen done by other companies before, where they bought a game that was like this one. I think when it came out was like $40, I think 40 or 50, and then Asmodee bought it, changed the box art so it didn't feature any of the in-game art really, and then made it come in a different size box, and then without adding any new content that I'm aware of, and I checked, made it cost 1.5 times the price. Yay! So anyway, Watson and Holmes is a game that's like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, except it's competitive. So you're trying to figure out the specific solution to a case. And that case is one of 13 that's included in this game. There's 13 of them, ranging from very easy, like easy kind of almost entry level, but even that one's not like, it's not a throwaway case by any means. There are no throwaway cases. Of the 5 out of 13 that I've done in this box so far, no throwaway cases. But you have essentially, it's a consumable game, but you get quite a bit of content here. You can play with lots of people, and each of you gets dealt a personality, which is either going to be like, you can be Toby. They're kind of like the minor characters, Mycroft, and you'll have this hidden special ability that you can flip over and then use it. Some of them are like permanent abilities from that point forward. Other ones just let you kind of like do something interactive to other players. That's because in this game, you're going to be trying to solve a mystery by following around a, not following around, but essentially you've got this layout of cards, and your cards are all like, they've all got locations on them. And so you're visiting that location, you flip over that card and you read what it is, you try to figure out the mystery. And once you get to the point where you feel you can solve the pre-given questions, which will be offered in the kind of intro narrative, you can then try to solve. And and at that point, it has player elimination, because either the game ends and you win or you're out. So very much, you know, like you decide when the time is right. And so whoever solves it first wins. And the way that you kind of like have interaction in this game is that only one person can visit each location in any given round. And so you're going to be bidding this currency, which is like kind of an abstract way of symbolizing time. It's horse carriages. So you can actually bid horse carriages whenever you go to a place. You can be outbid, and you actually lose one of your bid if you were outbid, but you lose all your bid if you won, obviously, because you had to do that. At the end, whoever has the most horse carriages, if there's a tie between 2 players trying to solve at the same time, whoever has the most horse carriages wins. And anyway, that's basic structure here. You're going to be reading a fairly, not a lengthy, but like a decent amount of text. If you are watching the YouTube, I'm showing right now, you know, it's about like, imagine like a page and a half in a novel. You'll be reading this aloud, and then each card has information on it. You actually make notes with a piece of paper and pencil. So I personally feel that Watson and Holmes is a amazing way to make that Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Like, I really love Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Let me just say that outright. And I love Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective as like a narrative experience. To me, it is the best example of a game and theme at the same time, because it is literally a narrative that is written by like basically a professional author. For me, what almost makes me have like bad just digestion problems as soon as I encounter it is when I read crappy flavor text, especially when it's written in the second person. Like, nothing makes me madder. And we got TC of the Tattered Board here in our chat right now, and this goes out to you. When somebody plays Eldritch Horror, they flip over a card and they go, "You are staring into the darkness, and all of your sanity is gone." Wait, hold on. Roll 2 die. No, it just kills my mood when the game is just not well, like when you got narrative and it's selling its theme and it's not well written. Watson and Holmes is absolutely amazing at how well it's able to condense a story into a very small amount of text and cards and make the theme come out, make the world come to life. And in Sherlock Holmes, it does this, but it does it in a much like slower, more, I would say fuller, but just much like it takes a lot longer. And I feel like it feels a lot to me like trying to solve an old point and click adventure game, like trying to solve a really hard puzzle in the newspaper. And honestly, I get stuck, man. So I get stuck in those games. Watson and Holmes, it is you're never gonna feel stuck because you're gonna know the answer at some point, and you only have a certain amount of rounds before you've seen everything. So I mean, to me, like it really does that same idea, that same theme really well.
Put hamster in microwave.
Put hamster in microwave. What?
Oh God, that was good.
What?
You said it reminded you of all the old point and click games. So I'm like, reference. I made I've been making references to.
Oh, that was such a good game.
Put hamster in microwave. Was that like Curse of Monkey Island?
No, it was Maniac Mansion.
Maniac Mansion. It's even great. It's even better if you give the remains of the hamster back to the owner and he kills the character.
This is like an old I don't know, guys.
Oh, it's like from the 80s. It's old.
Yeah. So that sounds like a roguelike almost. Is that?
No, it's a point and click adventure.
Yeah, it's an old
one.
It's just goofy as all hell.
It makes it sound. Yeah, you guys are really selling it here. It sounds really goof. So here, what I would say though, is that you're never really making choices. You're just trying to figure out what is the underlying mystery. And what I love most about Sherlock Holmes, about Watson and Holmes, I should say, is that it deals with the type of current events in a very tasteful and complex way. And these are things like a colonial soldier, like in South Africa, which is a historical, something about this Victorian England period, who has an element of remorse. And to me, like the way that the story is unearthed in little bits and pieces is amazing. I feel like it has the same problem as Alchemist, where you flip a card and sometimes you just don't get the information you need. And it's central to the puzzle that those pieces are hidden and scattered. But at the same time, like I forgive it here in Watson and Holmes more than I do in Alchemist. Though I still like Alchemist. In Alchemist, it can just be really frustrating because there's so many other game mechanisms and game structure there. Here in Watson and Holmes, very loose, very easy to teach. And yes, it has that issue of like you just didn't find the information you needed, and the guy that won did, and you didn't have much control over that. But it takes you on a ride, and the fact like you are winning this game if you're sitting there, if you get the story, and if you figure it out. Even if you just read, like when you read the solution, which flashing really quick, solution, when you get the solution, it to me, like it just feels like this sort of storybook, really well complex and layered storytelling that is to me very surprising for how condensed and short story like it is. So something that I don't think even Sherlock Holmes succeeded at, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, and that's what I really like about Watson and Holmes. Very, very positive on this review. Oh, but yeah, maybe it's just that if you wanted to sum up the too long didn't read of my review is basically Joe's dumb, likes this one better because he doesn't like thinking as hard as Sherlock Holmes makes him, and he loves talking about some third person, which makes his wife think that he needs help, and so does it with everybody else. So, anyway.
Joe, do you refer to yourself in the third person when playing board games alone with your wife?
I might refer to myself in the third person when playing board games alone by myself. There was a scientific study once that said something about people that talk out loud actually are statistically have higher IQs. And are statistically have higher IQs. That quote, that phrase right there. And that made me feel like not entirely like that's me, but at least I didn't feel quite as crazy as I probably really am.
Yeah, I scared somebody who brought that up with me once because I was talking to myself working out a problem. And they're like, yeah, talking to yourself's a sign of intelligence. I'm like, yeah, but question. When you do it, is it more like a committee? Because that's kind of how mine works.
Yeah.
I feel like a constant game of werewolf is going on in my head.
Where you're just like killing different parts of your personality.
And then new villagers, aka fresh blood, come to town all the time.
That's actually a pretty in-depth and complicated way to look at like the forming of ideas in your head. I like it.
It's either
I
that
like
or
it. It's
Trent's,
almost like a professional writer said it.
it's either that or
Almost.
Trent's ego and his id are currently playing a game of diplomacy with each other.
Yeah.
My 7 personalities are playing diplomacy right now.
Yeah. Only one will ever win. Wait, no, you can win. Like, you can have multiple people win. Not everybody, though.
Oh gosh.
Speaking of diplomacy, which that's not considered a heavy game, is it? Would you say diplomacy is a heavy game? I mean, it's a long game.
That depends on your definition of heavy. That really does.
Yeah, that's a tough one to call. But
I don't know.
diplomacy, well, whether or not it's a heavy game, we're going to talk about not heavy games, but light games that heavy gamers might enjoy. That was my review of Watson and Holmes, and here we go. Andy, take it away, sir. Andy starts tap dancing with a little flat hat.
Okay. I don't know. I was talking about Maniac Mansion with people in chat.
Yeah, I noticed that. There was some pretty good comments. There's a reference to LeChuck, which I got since, Monkey Island.
Yep.
Yeah, we had.
Anyway, so yeah, our topics are the light games that heavy gamers would still enjoy playing or would play with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, well, that was our topic, guys. We're going to move on to hype now. That would be like from Andy's perspective. No, for real, Andy. Take it away.
So yeah, anyway, I guess light games that, heavy gamers would, enjoy playing and whatnot. I guess for me, it's important here to define what do we mean by a light game, because if you're talking about a game that's kind of a turn your brain off kind of game, whether it's light or heavy, I really don't think most heavy gamers are going to be comfortable playing that. So, for example, what would be like Farkle or
LCR.
Yeah.
Oh God, LCR. Yeah.
Or
no
the zombie one, the rolling dice zombie.
zombie dice.
Yeah, zombie dice. Things like that where there's not really any decisions to make. Like, I don't think most heavy gamers are going to really be interested in that as a thing to spend their time doing. Now, if you got a light game, by definition, or I guess the definition I would use for a light game would be there's not a lot of rules overhead that someone who's not necessarily long in the hobby, they could still understand it if they're new and to go along that, but they still have some interesting decisions that you can make. So for example, a light game for me might be something like a Paris Connection, where you can play it in 15-20 minutes, you can set it up, you can teach it in about 10 or 15 minutes, maybe less than that, but yet there's still really interesting decisions to make there. I guess for me, things that a light game can have that are going to be more of a turnoff to me would be if they don't really have a depth of decisions. Like I said, I play games because I want to think hard. That to me is a pleasurable activity, which was funny because someone on our Slack channel was like, "Are you being serious? You never hit a wall on that?" And I'm like, no, I don't. I want to play, I could play 18xx all night. And
disclaimer, Andy. Disclaimer, of all the guys that I've ever played with, you might be the person who has just the most gaming blue balls.
That's one analogy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. But yeah, you get to play once a week, man. So I feel like I get that you want that to be a heavy game, and the other times you play
But I'm playing 18xx online almost constantly throughout the week. It
okay,
doesn't.
Well, yeah, I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, so I mean, it doesn't bother me. There's never a time. I guess if you're talking light games, like something in the realm of a party game or a trivia game, there's never really a situation for me where I'm like, no, I would rather do that than play Vinos. No, I'd rather play Vinos.
Andy, show me where the light game touched you.
The light game? It didn't touch me. I was too scared. Knew the heavy game was going to beat its butt. No, anyway, I guess for me is I like light games that still have some depth of decision, that still have some tension to them. If it's a game that you have to turn your brain completely off to enjoy it, then I would probably just rather be doing something else, quite frankly. It's those kind of things are not fun for me. So, you know, and the other thing I think that light games need to not have for heavy gamers to like them more is much in the way of an I don't know the right word for it, but a overshown catch-up mechanism. So, for example of that, a catch-up mechanism I don't particularly like is like in the game Isle of Skye, where it's like, oh, you really suck at auctions. Here's some extra money because you're a twit. I don't know. Like, no, I would rather just be punished for my lack of ability to value things correctly.
At that point, though, it's kind of like almost like Power Grid. Would you consider Power Grids like the way that Power Grid's catch-up mechanism? I mean, Power Grids, calling Power Grid has a catch-up mechanism really, I think, upsets a lot of the big Power Grid fans out there because it's a rule that you can manipulate. So, like with...
It's meant to be manipulated. It's not a catch-up mechanism. It's something you use to mess with other players.
I mean, it's just like kind of like starting a company in 18xx at a specific par value, so it operates right at a specific time to mess other people up. I feel like that's kind of the way that the Power Grid thing can work, especially when you're regarding like when you have access to certain cards for auction, right? But I mean, like that's when it gets called a catch-up mechanism. Here, I do understand kind of what you're saying, Andy, because money is kind of objectively good to at least have, and you get rewarded.
It's not quite the same thing because you're not manipulating that. It's just, oh, you're dead last. Here's a little extra stuff to try to get back to.
Well, I mean, like you're not always going to be scoring points necessarily. I suppose this, I feel like, is definitely more on the lines of a catch-up mechanism than Power Grid, but I still feel like you can manipulate it. You know, it's not. Yes, it is about how many points you have and how close you're to winning, but like in Power Grid, it's also about how many cities you have, which is how close you are to winning.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I've heard less people, talk about gamers. When I see the kind of games they enjoy, they typically don't have catch-up mechanisms.
You hear that, Power Grid players? You're not heavy gamers.
Andy Power Grid. That's like a gateway, right?
Yeah, I think this is now time to read the comment in the chat that is, Andy, have you considered a treatment plan for your addiction?
Nah.
Unapologetic.
Yeah. No, another good one that I think is the closest I've come to see like a light party game that heavy gamers would like is Ponzi Scheme.
No, Ponzi Scheme. Interesting.
Yeah, like Ponzi Scheme I would play the crap out of. And it's not really all that heavy. But you got some interesting decisions and things to value in that game.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally could see that. Because when I was playing Ponzi Scheme, I almost, like, I said, like, oh, this is like an economic game. But it's, like, really kind of got that sort of, like, I don't know, it just had a very, like, you're all sliding down the side of this mountain, and it's just whoever falls off is a loser, and then whoever's still highest up wins. And to me, that was, like, a really good economic game, twist on your normal, like, sort of maximize your business decisions that you'd see in, like, any other Euro game. Really, yeah. I agree with that, Andy. I can totally see. That's actually a great example. Was that listed in our guild? Because we posed this question in the guild.
No, that's what I've been thinking about since the topic was brought up.
Okay.
Another one Trent brought up, which I think will fit in this category, is the Climbers. It's really simple, but there's a lot of interesting manipulation of the, these blocks you can do to try to get higher. Yeah, Neue Jaime is an auction game. I think any light auction game would work well. So, for example, Ra.
Yeah.
Like Ra would be, that's one like I'll play hands down.
I wonder, have you played Medici? Because I wonder if you would draw the line between Ra and Medici, or if you. I
haven't done Medici. I have done Amun-Re, which I liked, but I would Ra I think is the better game of the two.
Ra's a little bit shorter almost, and a little bit less focused. But yeah, I mean Amun-Re is I feel like there is auctions, but it's not the only thing. Whereas in Ra, it's like that's it pretty much.
Yeah, and then a lot of
if you're talking about light games for heavy gamers, Ra would be the better choice for that.
Yeah, and then depending on the game, anything in the winsome line, Paris Connection, I don't know, a whole lot of other train named ones, but a lot of the Cube Rails games don't really have a high rules overhead, so you could play them, with light gamers, except I think a lot of them would look at it and go, you seriously paid $40 for like paper and construction paper components? So there is that. But I don't know. So I think you just have to have a light game that's interesting. Like an almost perfect game for this category would be an Arboretum, where there's very tense thinking going on, but it's overall a fairly simple game. And Trick of the Rails is another one. It's just got to be something that has some interesting decisions to be made, and then I think you're more likely to get heavy gamers doing it. What was the one that was? I think it was Wizard or Wizards was getting played like crazy at HeavyCon, which was just kind of a trick-taking game with a slight twist, and so. That got quite a bit of time at HeavyCon. I saw that. Anything along those kind of lines, auction games, just things like that. But yeah, Kyle played. Yeah, Wizard was one of my favorite moments of HeavyCon because Edward was in a game, and he's really good at trick-taking games, and I managed to completely screw him in one round, where I actually played a trick-taking game correctly and guessed what was going around. And anyway, it was really fun.
There's a good comment here about how trick-taking games in general. I think partner games, because of the dynamic that you've got when working with a partner, those partner trick-taking games can be especially cool. I mean, you mentioned Trick of the Rails, and I feel like I really contest that Trick of the Rails would please heavy gamers if it wasn't themed around trains. I feel like if you took a different theme there, and I don't think the theme is really that central to the gameplay in that game, and I know this blasphemy to whoever's listening, but I think Tichu, and I'd really be interested to try Wizard, but I mean these are games that people who like that really in-depth thinky heavy game will enjoy those.
Yeah, and so I don't know, there's a lot of I feel probably quite a few abstracts would fall into this category.
Yes, abstracts. That's pretty much what you're describing, in my opinion. When I think of a light game or a simple game that a heavy gamer would enjoy, I think most abstracts will work.
Well, that's because you end up, what you essentially peel off is you peel off the theme that would cause, there to be any added time or any added complexity for theme's sake, but you're left with the decisions, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, most abstracts don't have really complicated rule sets to them.
No, they don't.
So I think those kind of things would work pretty well most of the time. Let me think. Is there any? I want to think I had another one thought of, but
I agree. Arboretum really does just take. I think the fact that in Arboretum you've just got this immense stress because you have to choose. You have this tight choice of do I play cards or do I hold them in my hand? And anytime you have a card you want to keep in your hand, you've essentially reduced your hand size, for the rest of the game from that point on. and then you're also trying to build out a lot of the decisions you have to deal with the repercussions of. But it still has that simple, easy, shuffle it up and deal it out. Takes just a few minutes, a minute or two to set up.
And then
I agree.
And then there's the whole Tiny Epic series, right, Andy?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
No. It's one of the only games I ever walked away from during the scoring because I just didn't care anymore.
Wow.
No, I don't think those would be in that category. There's a way too much randomness for randomness sake in there.
I think that
Battle
some
Line,
of the
maybe, by Reiner
Was
Knizia's
that?
Battle Line.
Yeah, Reiner. Well, that's only 2-player, but yeah, I think that in general, like you'll find that the people that I think that a lot of heavy gamers got kind of cut their teeth on Knizia and then moved into other games, and they still have like a little bit of a fondness. Because to me, I don't see huge amounts of difference between the classic Reiner Knizias and some of the slick, interesting new, like new releases that have kind of like new mechanical explorations. And I would say the same kind of about like Kramer and Kiesling, who've made a few like pretty popular games that I would say that have pretty high reputations even among heavier gamers. I think some of that, like, I wonder to what extent is like you've got this soft spot in your heart and you're willing to then kind of like go back to that. But when you play a new game, it's like, well, what's the point anymore? Because I feel like you've almost moved your sphere of interest past that, but you've taken that with you because back when you were there, you still had. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I could see it. Like, you like the light games you're nostalgic about more than similar mechanisms. Yeah, I don't know. Another one I think of as light for me would be Tinner's Trail. I really like playing that one, and it's not all that complicated.
I'd put in a vote for Northern Pacific.
Is this like the social?
First, we've got to
game?
decide if it counts as a game.
Social experiment, I mean.
It's basically a social experiment.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess, my idea is if a light game's going to appeal to a heavy gamer, there has to be some interesting rules, some interesting decisions that allow you to manipulate the game state. I think for a lot of heavy gamers, too, there's got to be some form of interaction in it. I have to have the ability to affect your game state. You need to have the ability to affect my game state. And I kind of think or feel that at least for me and maybe some other heavy gamers, a light game is sort of what becomes filler games for people who are on that end of the hobby. It's not something that they're going to go to a game night to play, but they'll break out. Oh, it's about time to go home. We got 2 hours to kill. Yeah, let's do Tinder's Trail or something like that.
Well, Andy, have you ever played Biblios? Because you just mentioned the word filler, and a lot of times, like, people outside of heavy games will mention the king of the filler as being the guy who designed Biblios, Dr. Finn's games. Anyway,
yeah, I like
have
Biblios
you played that
a lot. Yeah.
Well, it's cool. I mean, it's got a simple, almost push your luck element at the beginning, but I mean, it's kind of a lighter start. I would definitely say in the later game, like, you actually do auction off cards, and at that point, like you're auctioning off essentially one portion of the deck. But yeah, it's a nice, interesting way to me of making a deck of cards really interesting. To me, like, the way that you get the cards is almost always much more interesting than what you do with the cards, unless that's a part of a much larger game, like, anyway, kind of a different topic, but yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I do have that kind of feeling from seeing it that the lighter games often become the filler games for heavy gamers. A lot of heavy gamers play longer games, take 3 hours or more. And so a light game with some interesting decisions can be, a good one to have around if people are waiting for a game to stop or, you want to wind down for the night or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can just you can throw down Splendor in like 10, 15 seconds.
And you can also, you can throw Splendor out the window in 3.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, just those.
Mm-hmm. Anything, Trent, that you would add to that? Like, I mean, I know that you said, I mean, abstracts encompasses a lot for you. So I really think, that being the core of what you said, you could probably go all night listing all these different abstracts. Is there anything that you think would not quite fit inside that umbrella?
I'm gonna point to a game that I've always had a soft spot in my heart for, and that's Radis. I really like Radis. I think that's a game I will play with almost anyone. I think I can convince a lot of heavy gamers to appreciate it if we play with particular sets of roles. I think there are some sets of roles that work well, making it almost a gateway. There are some sets of roles, and I'm saying this because I've got expansion, like all the expansion roles thrown in the box. But I think there are some sets of roles that make that game very heavy and thinky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fan of Radis. It's one of my look, it's my Trent's undiscovered gem. But Radis, buy Radis. No. Radis is great.
Yeah, and that was kind of like Trent's review of Ethnos. Why play Ethnos when you can play Radis?
Yes, that was literally my review of Ethnos. It's like, I can't conceive of why you would ever play Ethnos in a world where Radis exists.
Yeah, well, in Ethnos, the issue with it, like, there was a light game that had some interesting mechanisms, but, like, I could never see recommending that to any heavy gamer because you just had so little control over what options were at your disposal in the game. And, that to me, as it frustrates me, and I barely tolerate it, and I don't even know if I really do in the long run. But a heavy gamer would just they just stand up and leave the game. I could see. One game though that does like card draw really well is one that just got mentioned in our comments, and that's Innovation. Trent, you play an awful lot of Innovation, and there's a game that has like cards drawn where you're kind of off the top of a deck, but it seems to have quite a bit of traction among heavy gamers. Trent, you played it a lot. Do you think you maybe know why?
Yeah, the appreciation is because the board states get complex. It's a game that starts off simple, but the board state kind of gets more and more and more complicated, unless someone just wins, which can happen in that. But I think that's the appeal, is that you reach a point where you're really having to study the board state to make sure you don't do something stupid that hands the game to the other player. That happens a lot with people.
That sounds like kind of a Phil Eklund, or not Phil Eklund, but I would say like PAX Pamir, PAX Renaissance has that same thing to it. Are those, Andy, are those light games? I mean, you could get PAX Pamir could play in like 45 minutes when everybody knows it, maybe even less.
I feel like Phil Eklund games are, I don't know, they're their own weird animal. I think
they're Flux with 32-page rule books.
Yeah. I don't know if they're quite as random as Flux, but there's a lot. They're hard teaches.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, Andy. Where do we draw the line between a light game and a short game?
I don't know. Like, I think of my definition of a light game as one with a low rules overhead. It's not so much the game length or that kind of stuff. I guess I think of it as, can I teach this game fairly quickly? And can I teach it to someone who, has maybe played at least Catan? Would they understand what's going on in this kind of game? I think there's a lot of games that can kind of fit that bill. I think with a light game, typically you don't have a huge abundance of options. And that's kind of where I think like a Pax Pamir or Pax Porfiriana is not going to be in the light category.
Pax games are not light at all. I was not trying to say that. It was kind of more like to breed discussion. That the the chat has very much condemned my statement there. And I want you guys to know I totally agree with you guys. There's nothing light about the PAX games aside from maybe their playtime. I guess I think of light games as having low rules overhead and just a few decisions. I just like those decisions to be meaningful ones, but you're not like, it's not like a Vital Lacerda game where it's like there's 50 billion interlocking mechanisms you're trying to work out. Question for Trent and for the chat. Is Talisman then, by definition, a light game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just long. It's light and long.
That just sounds to me.
Here's the thing. This is an example. Abstracts were brought up. I feel like abstracts, a lot of them can end up being heavy, but they can also end up being short. There's a lot of decisions. They're mentally taxing, very AP prone. I think they're like literally talisman and abstracts are literally the opposite of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think with abstracts, you've always got, to some degree, like, you know, you've got the inline of, you know, have you played chess? Have you played checkers? Those are abstract games. These are kind of like them, except they do these things differently.
Yes. You can almost always use checkers or chess as a reference point for almost all abstracts. Like the ones I like the best, I can almost always start with chess or checkers as a starting point and get to what they are.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess for a light game, I think of, you know, not a huge amount of decisions and a low rules overhead. Just if you're going to make that light game appealing to heavy gamers, those few decisions it has have to be meaningful decisions. You know, you have to stress over it a little bit. If it's just a light game and decision A is equally the same as decision B, like, I don't know. Most heavy gamers, I don't think, are going to like those kind of games.
As someone who appreciates heavy games, this is my feeling on it. I will play almost any game if I feel like it has meaningful decisions in it. I don't like games where I feel like there isn't many meaningful decisions. When I start playing a quote game like that, I start to view it as an activity, or I start like treating it like a role-playing game. I will enjoy a game as a game if I have meaningful decisions, and that can come from all kinds of places. I think maybe the topic is here is a game quick to teach and has meaningful decisions in it.
Yeah, like a good example of one that I can use is the game Yahtzee. If you're just playing Yahtzee, that game has no meaningful decisions in it in its base state.
Well, I mean, like, you're pushing your luck towards things, man. There's decisions in Yahtzee. I'm not a Yahtzee fan.
Well, here's the thing. Base Yahtzee, I won't touch. But my wife actually introduced me to, I don't know what they call it, but it's like Yahtzee with 3 columns. So you have, when you say roll your however many 3s you get, you have a choice of whether you put it in the column where everything will be multiplied by 1 for scoring. There's a column where everything's multiplied by 2 for scoring and multiplied by 3. That then brings in some more interesting decisions to me, because it's like, all right, I rolled 4 3s. Do I want to put that in the second column so I hope I can maybe get more? A better roll in the third column? Do I put it in the 1 column? There's actually some really interesting things to choose at that point, not just, I'll just put it here.
Andy, what I heard is the reason that I won't ever play any of your mid-heavy Euros is because my wife makes me play Yahtzee.
And I play mid-Euros. It's below mid-Euros.
Your definition of mid-Euro is like heavy Euro. Like a Euro for you to be, like for you, a Euro is just straight up a mid-game. A heavy Euro is a mid-game. Anything that's not heavy Euro is like...
I'd play Viticulture.
Counterpoint, what's raw?
That's a light game.
I think that Raw's a light game. I mean, I think that like for me, like No Thanks is a great example of a light game that I have got the elusive Nate, who's a great, like, I think kind of a good, like a pretty good example of a heavy gamer to me. Like, he's not going to like a game, at least not with the group the games I play with him. He never's going to like a game, that's just like a simple, light, fast game, usually. But he really liked No Thanks. And I mean, it's because like the decisions that you make, like you all have like quite an impact on the game system. And yeah, it's simple. It doesn't have any overhead, and you can play like 5-10 minutes. And I did. Tony mentioned he got taught Farkle once, and yeah, it's like let's just make a really bad game out of dice because Yahtzee didn't already do that enough. Like, and Yahtzee's not as bad as some other games, but like still not my style. Farkle just terrible.
Yeah,
like,
upgrade
melt them down.
Upgrade to Uno.
I don't even know if Uno's better. Uno is.
No.
I would rather play Yahtzee than I'd play Uno.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yahtzee's over quicker. The thing that's hard to convince your relatives of in Yahtzee, though, because I used to have people do this, and I didn't really want to have to play Yahtzee for a long time, but I could not convince them that, you know what, we could all just have 5 dice and like do our own card and be done with this in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because literally that would not change the game in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Yahtzee,
Feels like
that game is truly multiplayer solitaire.
Mm-hmm. Quirkle was just brought up. What would you guys think?
I've never played Quirkle. I think I watched it once on tabletop. It looked slightly interesting at the time.
I don't know.
Trent?
It's okay. It doesn't really excite me. I could see people enjoying it. It's not one that really excites me.
Oh, I played. Oh, I don't know the name of it now. The one that's like Blockus, but it has like hexagons.
Gemblow. Yeah, Gemblow.
Yeah, like that one I enjoyed.
Yeah. And I think you would like Blockus as a result, too. I think Blockus is kind of just the more like mass market version of it.
Candyland.
When I was like
Candyland,
7 or 8, a friend of mine and I turned Candyland into a war game.
Candy, you should really play Candyland XX, which, by the way, TC is now the name of that 18XX, that theoretical 18XX game, where when you calculate the route, you roll dice for each city you hit, and that's how much money you got from it. Yeah, 18 Candyland.
Candyland. Chutes and ladders.
These are like barely even definitions of a game. Like we had that argument recently, like, is this a game or not? And yet, like Webster's dictionary says, if it involves luck at all, it's then by definition a game.
Well, the fun one on Chutes and Ladders was it wasn't actually designed to be a game. Like historically, it was like some kind of tool in Hinduism or something.
So it's designed to be.
No, it was like when you hit like a ladder or a chute, you had to read like these examples of like good karma and bad karma traits and things. It was like basically a teaching aid,
like the Vedics or whatever.
Yeah.
Veda.
Yeah, it was basically like a teaching aid for that religion's equivalent of Sunday school. But somebody's like, "Hey, I could make chutes and ladders out of this," like cultural artifact. So anyway, but what's another one that's actually classic? I've heard some heavy gamers really like backgammon, I think it is.
Backgammon's a fun gambling game.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife actually, I got taught that game by like my wife and like her dad. Like they played a lot of backgammon, like tons of it, games and games and games like that. And there's a lot of people that like, yeah, it's I don't know. It's got a little bit of decisions in it, but I definitely felt like this game feels really hamstrung by dice.
No, Joe, I wouldn't expect you to feel that way.
Yeah, I never say that about any games. We have to do a best dice game list sometime. Anyway, any final thoughts, guys, on light games for heavy gamers?
Yeah, make sure the decisions are interesting and take some thought, and you can never probably go wrong with an auction game.
Yeah, auctions will definitely help out. Trent?
Can you teach it in 5 minutes? Does it have interesting decisions? Then it qualifies.
Cool. All right. Well, that is the meat and bones of our topic. I would like to say, I didn't mention this earlier, but I do have this new YouTube video channel that's under the Good, the Bored, and the Uglies YouTube channel. I should say it's a YouTube video series called The Silent Coefficient. And what I'm trying to do is kind of take a look at, games based on how light they are and how, like, whether or not you're rewarded by the whole game system. Essentially the more deep a game is, the more reward is potential. But anyway, it's kind of like you can check those out. But I just wanted to say that I gave a shortened review of Watson and Holmes compared to what I might have otherwise done, but I just recorded a video right before we started this recording. So if you go into the Good Board Ugly YouTube channel, you can find my review of Watson and Holmes there if you're at all interested in taking a little bit of a deeper dive into it. So now moving right along, we're going to talk about games that we are excited and looking forward to. And I think let's go ahead and kick her off here with Andy, since you're going to hype a light game here for us.
Yeah. So anyway, I've pre-ordered this game after hearing the designer do an interview on, I think, Heavy Cardboard. And I'd heard about it before and was somewhat interested in it, but the game is called Stellar Horizons, which kind of thematically sounds a little bit like High Frontier. So the goal is, you're building a space agency, you're building a space program, you're exploring the solar system. But this game is just several levels of insane. So I, of course, had to pre-order it. Stellar Horizons, the designer of this game is a actual engineer. It has like a PhD and stuff.
So basically, this is just another High Frontier.
No, Joe, this is better. Listen. This is described as World in Flames, the sci-fi game.
World in Flames is like the 100-hour game, right?
Yeah. So this one, according to what I've read so far, has 1,600 chits in it. There are short scenarios, but if you want to play a full campaign, it's listed on BGG right now of a playtime between 60 and 1,200 minutes.
1,200. Is this based on fiction then?
It's actually based, I believe, loosely on a fiction. No, wait. No, it's not. I don't think it's based on fiction. No, it's actually built on a lot of hard science. So that's where it's kind of similar to High Frontier in that there's a really big tech tree to this thing, and everything on it is a extrapolation of a technology that is either existing and needs to go a step further, or that is plausible given modern science. And so, yeah, it's not like a Star Wars where you have sound and space kind of game. It's more like the TV show Expanse, where things model much more realistic physics and stuff like that.
Expanse is going to go in a different direction soon, having read all the books.
Oh yeah, so have I. But yeah, it goes a little oddball there. I'll give it that.
But
anyway, at least the early Expanse. The cool thing, I guess, on how this works is there'll be a lot of turns where you're taking your action, but then there'll be these like planning rounds where you're essentially trying to like get enough support and money to hatch your plans and plan what kind of spaceships you're going to build. So like the player mats I've seen so far kind of remind me of Eclipse. You know how in Eclipse you could put little chits on there to modify the designs? And that was really cool in Eclipse, except like the ships on Stellar Horizons have like 20 different things you can put on them.
Oh, nice. So instead of it just being like this little board, it's got things for everything.
Crazy huge. I can't wait.
How do they do? I wonder how they do like combat and those types of things. Is it you said it was like World in Flames, so it's probably going to be focused heavily on the like thematic like dice combat, I'm assuming.
No, well, you can actually. Certain factions are more militaristic than others, and it is
just kind of like Eclipse. I mean, in Eclipse,
yeah,
I've seen wins by player who's never rolled any dice, but then it just depends on what the rolls are and everything.
Yeah, but it's much more like it's based.
Is this a P500, by the way, Andy?
No, this was on Compass Games, so it's a straight pre-order.
I'm not familiar with them.
You can pre-order it and not pay till it ships, so it's kind of like a P500.
That's cool,
but not exactly like it. I think there might be dice combat, but like the way the designer described it was military is an option, but it's not a requirement. So
it's like Through the Ages.
yeah.
Oh. Yeah,
yeah. I think it might be one of those where you need at least enough military to be a deterrent.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was.
It does sound like Through the Ages. You're right. Whoever said this in the chat is right. Tony, I think, said that you guys are like selling me on this game. You're making this sound actually really cool, Andy.
No, it seems really cool from what I've seen so far.
What's the catch? Like, what is it? Do you roll a handful of dice every time your ship takes off and you might just blow up?
Oh no, that's High Frontier.
I know that's High Frontier, but this doesn't have that.
As far as I can tell, no. I mean, it's supposed to be based much more on realistic physics and things like that. There really isn't a lot of info out about this game, just a few images and a brief description. Well, sort of brief description. And that designer interview, because it's essentially coming out from a company that does more games, so it's not like hyped all over the place. And this very much, it's very much, I think, a labor of love for this guy. And the main thing he's designed other than this is like expansions for World in Flames. So it should be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm buying it because I'm insane.
Well, and it's like hard science, so I mean, you get your fix there.
Thematically, that's a huge hook for me, I got to admit. So, I don't know. It just seems really cool. So Stellar Horizons, check it out. You can find it on Google if you just do stuff. Yeah. TC, that is the downside, I will agree. Yes, the game is $110.
Well, it sounds to me like it's one of those games. It's like a huge game. You're talking about a game here that's going to give you a ton of stuff.
Yeah, and a ton of gameplay. I mean, if you just play the scenario once, you're talking, I think he said it's not as bad as World in Flames. World in Flames takes you about a week or so. He said his full campaign you could do in a weekend if you just made sure to focus on it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Which how Andy loves those ones, like 1808.
I probably will never get that played, but
but you're gonna have it.
Yeah, but I want to have it. But there is, it's kind of more of a system too. So there's like supposedly competitive co-op and solo scenarios as well. So Anyway, it looks cool. Stellar Horizons, check it out. It's coming out now, I think, early 2018. So
cool stuff. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna go ahead, Andy, and take over hype here, so that we can end on a high note, or maybe a low note, or maybe even the brown note. And I'm gonna tell you guys about just how excited I am. We've got like this amazing little string of birthdays in our game group. Trent just had his yesterday, and actually the day after tomorrow is Jonathan, and John is he's for his birthday party teaching me D&D, as in Dungeons and Dragons, as in a real RPG, like my first RPG. And I wonder if like how much like low, like hands going like this right now John has going on, because he's actually going to be the DM of our group, and I've already picked out that I am going to be a I'm going to be a half orc, like a rogue, I think, half orc rogue, and I've already picked out a name, and it's based on what John has said on the podcast is his favorite book, because I got a chance to read it over the break. Not over the break, but when I was on vacation on the beach, I read Good Omens by Terry Pratchett, and I've picked out a name based on that. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to it. The Elusive Nate's going to be there, a couple other RPG peeps from the group, and then I think one or two people might be learning the system along with me. So I think it's going to be a one-shot, because with me involved, John probably wants to keep it. He doesn't want to commit to me in that situation. Andy's smiling. He knows what I'm talking about. But I've got this like I just think it'd be really fun to go in, and try to just create as many, kind of like I'm looking at like a party game, kind of like when we played Say Anything with my wife's family. It was essentially like just a loose platform by which you tried to write funny, simple, funny jokes based on prompts that were, essentially chosen by family members. And that to me, like though it probably would have given Andy hives, I very much enjoyed it, and maybe that's what D&D is going to be like. Maybe it won't, but I'm trying to be as open-minded as I can at this point, and hopefully I'm excited because it's finally happening. My hype's D&D. Yeah, I think we're playing 5th edition.
Remember, if you're playing a rogue, the best way to make other people happy is steal their magic items.
And I think I'm going to request that since it's a one-shot, John ends with the rocks fall, everyone dies.
No, what's the worst one I ever read about? Oh, yeah, it was like an RPG where a couple people got invited to be NPCs in this bar scene for his main group. And then the people that got invited as NPCs ended up massacring every character in the main group.
Yeah. It was like a separate group that just came in, and then yeah, I think I've read about it. It was like, and then the DM basically turned that into a bad dream.
Yeah,
and said that none of it ever happened. Yeah, but a few funny comments that I've just been able to catch up on, and it was like, first of all, yeah, what am I actually going to do when I roll a critical failure? TC says something like, hey, Joe, you rolled another 1 on the D20. Let me look at this chart again.
No. The best I so wish I still had this movie because it's the only movie that's ever done D&D right. But it was like a movie done by like some college theater group. And there's a scene that does it perfectly, Joe. They come to a locked gate. The warrior comes up, giant, beefy, muscled warrior, and rolls like a 2 and like pulls a back muscle trying to get it off. And then the wizard was like, I'll try, and rolls a 20 and like rips the gate off and like throws it 10 feet away and is like,
just doesn't. All right, Trent, haven't heard anything from you. What is your advice, and what do you think will happen? What do you hope will happen? What do you think will happen? Any comments?
Jonathan has a pretty good story picked out. He's a really good GM. I think he will probably I'm pretty sure he's gonna make the criticals fun as possible. So I don't think you'll be frustrated with it. I think he's basically doing everything he can with D&D to make it Joe friendly.
Oh, what's sweet of him.
Yeah. That's all I gotta say. I think you'll be fine.
Including not letting me play in it.
Andy, you just sound evil, dude. You just like, I'm a GM, and I don't let anybody win or even feel like they have a chance at winning. Just death.
Well, no, my favorite thing to do in RPGs was always like give the DM weapons. So, like I had a guy in our group that was like a total min-maxer, and he'd be like, I have no family. I was an orphan. Like, there is nothing in my backstory you can exploit whatsoever. And, I would always be, something in my backstory. Like, we played a game a friend of mine set in like Roman times. So like what would it be like if like Romans had wizards? And I was playing a druid. I'm like, the Romans slaughtered my entire Celtic tribe, and it was all because of me. I have no idea why or what's going to happen. Have fun with that later down the road.
It sounds to me, Andy, like you're like, this is just all I'm doing is just making this difficult for you at every step of the way. And for today's scenario, I have titled it lovingly The Recession.
Yeah. No, I don't know. When I played role-playing games, it was all for story, so I always wanted something interesting to happen. So like there was one campaign you could join guilds, and I joined a guild that gave you a bonus to initiative, but it changed the way you play the game. So like whatever you said your character was going to do, you had to do. So we encounter like this giant vat of like frothing green liquid. I'm like, it would be hilarious if I just kicked it over. Oh shit. And I ended up poisoning the entire party because
that was the medical term, everybody. That was the medical term. We're still family friendly. Just Andy was using a medical term that's very acceptable in a hospital situation. My mom's a nurse. I know this.
Yep. So anyway, you should have fun with it. It'll be all right. It's like I said, if you enter into it with the story being important and not the game system, then it's a much better experience then.
Cool. Well, that's where I'm hoping to come from. And yeah, like it'll be one birthday celebration, and now we're gonna finish this episode off with the hype from our other birthday boy.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about Power Grid's Fabled expansion. So basically, what this is you play Power Grid, except if you're familiar with Friedman Freeze's other game, Fabled Fruit, it's basically a legacy game. It's one that was a big hit with my family. Okay, so you play normal game Power Grid, you set a deck of cards on the table. And this deck basically tells a campaign story that you play over multiple games of Power Grid. It gives you alternate goals with various ways to earn points, tells a story on the board. It comes with apparently 4 different campaigns that you can play, one on each of the base game of the default Power Grid, both sides of that board, and then the Power Grid Deluxe, both sides of that board. I'm really interested to play it. It seems like an interesting idea. I don't think the campaigns are overly long. I can't even conceive. I mean, I don't think that you would want a 20-game campaign of Power Grid on the same map. I think people would murder each other. But, I mean, this is like supposedly a 3 to 4 game campaign from what I've been reading. But the game apparently can branch and change significantly based on how the campaign works. So I'm really interested to see how that works. It's like Power Grid Legacy without actually modifying the game. And I kind of want to see how that works. So my hype is Power Grid Fabled.
It is just so crazy because I've just played Fabled Fruit for the first time. And you, Trent, sounded like you enjoyed that game quite a bit with your family. Because
yeah, it was a good family game.
Mm-hmm. And I found the same thing. My wife really enjoyed it. But, man, to take that and add it to a game like Power Grid, like, holy crap, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Like, where you're playing, like, it didn't sound to me like it was going to be like incredibly like game ending impactful type things, but just like you're essentially changing the rules of the game as you play, but you've got kind of like goals, like personal goals that are essentially going to then allow you to get a short-term bonus and make this long-term rules change that affects everybody. Does that sound about accurate?
That seems to be what it'll be, because it's kind of what goes on in Fabled Fruit. So yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm just intrigued to see how it works. This is one of those things I got to see how this one works. A few games like that come out every year. This is one of them. I've just got to see how it works, because it sounds just like that's fascinating. How did this happen?
Oh man, yeah. I think, Trent, I'm wondering, because 504, I think you liked. And it's just like Friedman Freeze is really taking this sort of like idea of campaign games to another level. And I think that 504 maybe was too ambitious. And to me, Power Grid Fabled maybe sounds just a bit more grounded. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so. 504 is a social experiment in a box. Anyway, I would say that Power Grid Fabled is much more grounded. I find 504 fascinating, but some of the games are not so good, and some of them are good, some of them are not so good. It's one of those things, again, I just find fascinating. I got to see how it works. It's just, and Friedman Freeze seems to be good at this. So,
and we have now we have a reason to really start bringing Power Grid to our game nights, and I think that's a game that has been just gaining a lot of traction, kind of like a rebirth of it was bound to happen, and then this announcement came along and like just guaranteed that as in our future of our specific local game group here. So I'm excited for that. I'm really ready to play Power Grid without teaching it, without being with players that are learning for the first time, and very excited to see exactly what all this Fabled mechanism entails. So and I won't, for the record, let me go on the record in saying this, I do not think like I really was always interested, and I always saw like the draw of RPGs, but when it comes to miniatures games, totally have nothing against them, but I really don't think without having a board game that is kind of comparable to a miniatures but has specific changes that I'm interested in, I don't think I would ever go full miniatures. So no Warhammer 40K for me, no matter what you say in the comments section. Well, Trent, happy birthday. And it's great having you guys on. And another excellent episode. And I'm really pumped to be back around my game group. And I'm excited for this upcoming getting back to gaming, back to playing more advanced games. So I did actually occasionally enjoy getting a chance to play some of the lighter games that some people make impossible to play.
You can play them all you want. I'm just going to be playing 18XX over in the corner.
Well, Andy, since we just got done with that heavy game, why don't we play this little light one? And he's like, no. Andy once played a game of Codenames. It's like Andy makes it sound like this game of Codenames tortured him, just waterboarded him. The way that it sounds, because it was like game of Codenames after game of Codenames, and we didn't play any heavy games. And I think at that point, Andy, that was where you just about grabbed your ladder, jumped, and then ran out, climbed to the top of the building and just jumped off.
I think I had a vision in my head of someone walking in and going, "Hey guys, let's play Time's Up." And then in the vision in my head, it showed the outside of the game store and them just flying through the air, followed by a box of Time's Up.
Well, that's better than mine, man. My dreams are generally just a bunch of ironic, self-deprecating vignettes. Anyway, this has been our episode, this week's episode of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly on light games for heavy gamers. We hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much to everybody who came by, participating in our comment section here. It was awesome to hear from you guys. Everybody, all of our listeners are very, very important, and I appreciate you for having such amazing taste and for choosing The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly to get your board gaming media. Also, reminding you guys, Game Surplus, good place to buy games. And now that we're part of Punchboard Media, there's some other really great products, really great videos, really great text reviews, really great audio reviews, and just I was in the car. I had to commute back home from my parents' house if I picked up the dogs, and those podcasts kept me company, and that's why we do this. Is for those of you that enjoy consuming this type of media, really good stuff. I'm myself a consumer. You'll find a lot of good stuff on Punchboard Media. So I'm your host, Joe Sallin. I've been joined by
Andrew Dennison,
Trent Ham.
Have a great week of gaming. We'll catch you next time on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.